Hello, 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 everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Abhi Shrestha. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Education Associate for Steppenwolf Theater. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, both in the webinar and on Facebook Live, which is super exciting. We are so excited to have Erika, you join us today and be in conversation with us. I know your book, I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, has a really special place in our hearts over at Steppenwolf, as it was our last Steppenwolf for Young Adults performance in production. But I'm also excited to have you join us in like a different, have you and your cat join us in a different capacity today.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Simone
Hi,
Sanchez. And I, of course, am Erika Sánchez, she, her, hers. And I'm really happy to be here and share whatever I can about my very bizarre writing processes.
I'm super excited. I wanted to take a moment to also mention that we are also joined by captioner Jessica Spriggs with Alternative Communication Services, as well as Lizzie Rangel and Benny Yamas from Faith Interpreting Services, who are providing our ASL interpretations for today's workshop. If you are someone who specifically could use the captioning service, please find the closed captioning button below at the bottom of this webinar if you would like to activate that in your window. This workshop will also be on gallery view, so the ASL interpreting will be available throughout today's workshop. This is our first time having ASL interpreting available, so that's super exciting, but what also means that we're looking for feedback from you on the participant side for how we can sort of make this, improve this as we keep doing it, which is super exciting. And we'll send a survey around that'll sort of get your feedback for this and just in more general terms as well. I also wanted to shout out, there's so many members of the education team, staff making today's webinar and Facebook live stream happen, so thank you. But specific shout out to John Rooney, who our education and leadership programs coordinator, who's making the tech magic happen on the other end of other side today. And you may see John hop in potentially if my video cuts out for whatever reason, but we're hoping that doesn't happen. It's gonna be awesome. I wanted to open up this virtual space with a land acknowledgement. This is something that we do in our theater when we are in our physical space together. And so I wanted to open up this virtual space in that way as well. I wanted to recognize that Steppenwolf Theater sits on native land. This area our building resides on is the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of Three Fires, including the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Odawa. Although for over 200 years, Native nations have been forcibly removed from our territory, this land continues to be a site of gathering and of healing for more than a dozen other tribal nations and remains home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois. I know we have people participating from all over the country, as well as other countries outside of the US as well. And so I just wanted to take a moment to encourage everyone to learn more about the land that they reside on and the native communities of that land. John will be posting a link in the chat to an awesome website that can help you do that. For those of you who are new to us at Steppenwolf, welcome. John, would you mind throwing up our mission slide real quick? Here in the slide that you're about to see, you can see our mission statement, and allied with our mission is our dedication to fostering programming that celebrates the learner, the maker, and the appreciator in you and in us. Maker Way, this workshop, this series, really is a way for Steppenwolf Education to serve not only our core constituents, teens, educators, and early career professionals, but to also open up those offerings to a wider community of lifelong learners and makers. And through our Steppenwolf for Young Adults play series, we serve a multi-generational audience and know how much participants can take from the chance to learn alongside folks across generations. That being said, I wanted to also engage some virtual guidelines to ensure that we are all being thoughtful in how we are together in this space. Firstly, to clarify, we're doing a webinar, which means you can hear and see me, Erika, and the interpreters, but we cannot hear and see you. You'll only hear from us today, but on Friday, part 2 of this workshop, which I totally hope that y'all join us, there'll be an opportunity for some of you to come off mute and be in conversation with us. So again, because of just all the audience that is here today, I wanted to go through these virtual guidelines really briefly. Please be mindful that we have participants ranging from 13 years old and up. The chat feature can be really awesome to engage with the panelists and have us in dialogue in this virtual space. And we'll give you instructions when to use the chat. Of course, we want you to really feel free to use that and be in conversation with us. But also know that sometimes it can feel a little distracting sometimes. So that is something that to note as well. The Q&A feature, which you can also see in the bottom menu bar you have, can be used for any questions you might have for around logistics of webinar. If you have a question about something Erika and I are in conversation about, feel free to throw it in the question and answer section, and I'll make sure to sort of get to it as best as I can throughout the workshop. Again, we do not wish to censor anyone's voice, but overly gratuitous language or hate speech is strictly prohibited, and we reserve the right to remove any participants not abiding by that. And so, of course, we're not going to do that because it's not going to get to that, but just wanting to throw that in the space as well. Okay, that's enough chatting for me today. To start, I'm excited to really have you, Erika, join us. I know you talked a little briefly earlier about who you are, but I just wanted to shout out how really awesome and exciting this is.
Thank you.
If there are folks here who do not know Erika, she has been on the New York Times bestseller list for like ever. I know you're actually back on it right now, I believe.
I don't know what happened, honestly.
Listen. And also, I just want to, again, thank you for joining us. And John, thank you for putting Erika's bio in the chat as well for folks who want to learn more about you. Erika, first off, how are you? How are you doing today?
I'm enduring, I would say.
Yes. I feel like we have to find those words that like keep us moving, but like keep us honest about how we're doing. So
yeah, I don't really say things I don't mean. So, you know,
yes.
Honestly, it's a challenge. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for asking me to do this. I love Steppenwolf. I have a very, very like special place in my heart for the theater and everyone involved with the play. So it's an honor, really. I think, you know, honestly, I'm in a perpetual state of rage about our country right now. I'm just overwhelmed by the ignorance of our president. And so like, you know, I'm just trying to cope with that.
Absolutely.
And I feel like so much of this was preventable because he was just completely incompetent and he did so much wrong. And so I'm grappling with that. Yes. But I'm trying to make the most of the situation, and I've been writing poetry actually lately, and I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, likewise. And I feel like that's the other thing where I'm like, how do we were just talking before we broadcast about like, we're both excited to see what kind of art comes out of this particular moment, right? And it's super exciting to hear you say that you're in particular writing poetry right now. I know you also write through and across genres. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about sort of, you know, your path and how you got started writing. What was the thing that really you gravitated towards?
Sure. I am all over the place, as you probably all know. I began with poetry. I fell in love with poetry first because I just thought it was so beautiful. Like spoke to me in a way that was really deep and inexplicable. And so I was in 6th grade and we were learning about poetry, and we were reading Edgar Allan Poe, and I don't know what happened. I was just enchanted. And I decided then that I was going to be a poet, and that has not changed. So I knew very early on that that was my calling. And, you know, it's a very strange choice for working class daughter of immigrants. You know, that's just very impractical, right? To say I'm gonna grow up to be a famous poet, like that's kind of ridiculous. So I don't know. I've been always just very tenacious, and I insisted that this was my path.
Yeah.
And so I wrote poetry before I wrote anything else. And in my late 20s or so, I began the novel.
Yes.
And it just kind of exploded out of me. And it was something that I felt like I needed to write. And I feel like poetry is the basis of all my writing. Without poetry, I don't think my prose would be as sharp as it is. And I pay very much, I pay a lot of attention to the sounds of sentences, to imagery, to rhythm, to the 5 senses, and I think I owe that to poetry. I mean, it taught me how to be precise and how to create evocative language.
Yeah, I love that. I love hearing how poetry sort of, because also when I read I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, I feel like I could so clearly see how poetry sort of really falls into the pockets of the novel in various ways. And I love hearing how you talk about how poetry informs your prose, and how sort of poetry sort of heightens the senses is what I'm hearing too. Like it sort of forces you to pay particular attention to so many different aspects of writing.
Yeah, attention to detail is something that I think is really important in prose, and I feel like all prose writers should read poetry, if not write it. But I don't think a lot do. I think a lot of people are intimidated by poetry, and that to me is kind of sad. And I try to undo that in my life, and I try to teach poetry in a way that is accessible, that makes people feel comfortable, that makes people feel excited about it. And so, you know, I have like 2 stepkids, and I've been teaching them poetry, and they fucking love it, you know, and it's been really, really cool to see how excited they are about it. And I feel like I got to them before their teachers did. So I think growing up, poetry was taught in a way that only allowed one interpretation. It was very rigid. It was very traditional, and I don't approach poetry in that way. And I feel like it's a disservice to kids to approach it like that. So yeah, poetry's just been the love of my life, honestly. And now I'm working on my 3rd book. It hasn't been announced, but it's under contract, and it'll come out God knows when at this point because of the coronavirus. So I will be announcing that soon, but that's nonfiction, and it's we're calling it a memoir now, I guess. And yeah, and I write about poetry also, and I write in a way that is very informed by poetry as well. It's just, I don't know, I can't escape it. It's something that I love so much.
Right. And I feel that also the thing about poetry is that it is both so specific, but also so vast. You know, I think one of my favorite things is that I was listening to a podcast, one of my favorite podcasts on being, and the poet,
I love that one.
I know, Naomi Shihab Nye, she talks about how she believes that we think in poetry. That's actually how our thoughts like manifest.
That's
and
beautiful.
So we're able to sort of see that in the different, you know, ways in which we move throughout the world. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I'm hearing a very similar thing where like poetry is sort of always there, even if you think it is or not.
Sure.
it sort of finds its way into your life and also into your work, which is super exciting.
Yeah, and it's a way of seeing the world. You know, it's more than just a kind of writing, it's a vision.
Absolutely.
And I feel like poets have a very different sensibility. And like when I talk to poets, it's very different than when I talk to anyone else. Like there's a sort of like attention to what we normally overlook. There's a sense of appreciation for things that we don't really notice or think are beautiful. And so I just love that way of looking at the world. It just makes me really happy.
Yeah, the heightened sense of observation, of just like viewing. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way that I make sense of the world, honestly. It's through poetry.
Same.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about, like, once you were enamored and you're like, this is, you know, this is the thing, could you talk about your pursuit of it, sort of your path, in getting to writing this novel and all that, sort of maybe your education, traditional or non-traditional, what that looked like?
Yeah, it was a very strange path, and it's kind of a long story, but I will try to make it as short as possible, honestly, because it's all over the place. So,
but also honestly, same.
It was not like a straight path to where I am now. That's for sure. So in high school, oh my God, there's construction going on. I'm sorry, I'm gonna close the window.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So in high school, I was like known as a poet. I, won all these poetry contests. I was very like involved in the poetry scene, and it was something that I was really, really proud of. It was part of my identity. And then I realized that in order to be a writer, like I should probably study English. And so after high school, I got my BA in English at UIC. And then I applied for a Fulbright in Spain, in Madrid. And so somehow I got it. And I spent the year gallivanting throughout Spain and Europe, just like writing poems, teaching, just getting into all sorts of capers and adventures. And it was like one of the most magical times of my life. It was so great. And then after that, I went and got a master's in creative writing, specifically in poetry, which, again, not the best financial choice. I got my degree and then I had no idea what to do, because how do you make money, I hadn't really thought it through. I just thought everything would work out. It didn't. It took many years of just struggling and toiling in obscurity. I was like submitting all the time. I had all these jobs that were like totally irrelevant to anything. I hated them. I was miserable. But the whole time I was writing and writing and writing and submitting and trying to get published and getting rejected a whole lot. So it was not easy for a long time. And then, little by little, I started to be recognized. I was writing a lot of articles online. I had kind of a following. I had this funny blog that I had like in 2010, I think I began it. And things started just to fall into place eventually. I had like a nervous breakdown at one point. Like it was a lot. But eventually my books were chosen for publication. First, the novel, actually. The poetry book took 10 years to complete. And then the novel took 5 years. And they got picked up at around the same time. So first it was the novel, then the poetry collection. And I was going through a really, really hard time during that time. And so it was a very bizarre moment in my life. And then everything just kind of like exploded. It was so strange that the books also came out like right next to each other. Like one in July, the other in October. Wow. And, you know, both of them have done extremely well. I got a fellowship to teach at Princeton and etc. So like, I think a lot of people see all of my credentials and it looks really nice. And it seems like I'm very accomplished, and I am, but there was a lot of rejection, a lot of just frustration for so long.
Yeah. And I love hearing you talk also about like how your path just is, as I think it is for everyone, is not linear. I think we have this idea of how like it goes from one thing to the next. But I love hearing you sort of talk about the different points of your life and different points where you didn't know and then you knew, because I feel like it continues to shift and change, and we continue to learn and adapt as we learn the things that we want and the things that, you know, we think we want, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, it's always been so clear to me what I wanted. You know, I was like, I was meant to write, and that's it. And I did like teaching as well, and I wanted to pursue that at some point. And I'm very lucky to do that now. I think it's one of the greatest joys of my life. But I felt for so long that I was just like wasting my talent, and like I didn't really feel appreciated anywhere I worked. And I mean, nothing had anything to do with what I had pursued for my entire life. And so it was just really emotionally trying. But you know, it was all worth it in the end, because I feel like my life is really amazing at this point.
I'm really excited to, we're gonna look at it in just a moment, look at a piece of your poetry and hear you talk about this specific poem. Did you write it when you were on the Fulbright, when you were in Spain?
No, actually, I went to Portugal right after I found out that my books were accepted for publication. It was kind of like a celebratory thing. Also, I had just left my marriage, so it was just like this very complicated time. And so, yeah, I went just on a whim, because I was like, why not? And I was by myself, and just being in Portugal and like reading poetry there and thinking about the term saudade, I felt like compelled to write this poem.
Awesome. John, I know you said you were going to hop in real quick just to speak about the ASL and
Yeah, so we're just realizing from some people that they're having some trouble getting the ASL interpretation while the slide's up. So we're going to do the best that we can to have the slide up just long enough for us to read it, and then take the slide down. So if you cannot find the interpreter on your screen, that you know that's what we're covering, and then we'll be right back. Apologies for that. We'll look on how to fix that for the future.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Awesome. So why don't we actually look at that poem, and then we can talk about it after we read it.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you, John.
So you would like me to read it out loud?
That would be awesome if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Saudade. In the Republic of Flowers, I studied the secrets of hanging clothes. I didn't know if it was raining or someone was frying eggs. I held the skulls of words that mean nothing. You left between the hour of the ox and the hour of the rat. I heard the sound of two braids. I watched it rain through a mirror. Am I asking to be spared, or am I asking to be spread? Your body smelled like cathedrals, and I kept your photo in a bottle of mezcal. Semen salt, wolf's teeth, you should have touched my eyes until they blistered, kissed the skin of my instep for thousands of years. Sealed honey never spoils, won't crystallize. I saw myself snapping a swan's neck. I needed to air out my eyes, the droplets on a spider web, and the grace they held. Who gave me permission to be this person, to drag my misfortune on this leash made of gold?
Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
last line, the last two lines just hit me hard. I feel like I've lingered with this. I've been with this poem for like the past week, and those two last lines always resonate in different ways. So
Oh,
just
thank
wanted
you.
to put that out as well. Would you?
Quick question, guys. Oops, sorry. Things are broken.
Everything okay? Okay, awesome.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to see if we can get Erika to read that again without the slide. That way the interpreter can actually do one with a slide and one without.
That sounds awesome. Yes,
Sure.
Erika, if you wouldn't mind.
Quick save. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Saudade. In the Republic of Flowers, I studied the secrets of hanging clothes. I didn't know if it was raining or someone was frying eggs. I held the skulls of words that mean nothing you left between the hour of the ox and the hour of the rat. I heard the sound of two braids. I watched it rain through a mirror. Am I asking to be spared or am I asking to be spread? Your body smelled like cathedrals and I kept your photo in a bottle of mezcal. Semen salt, wolf's teeth, you should have touched my eyes until they blistered, kissed the skin of my instep for thousands of years, sealed honey never spoils, won't crystallize. I saw myself snapping a swan's neck. I needed to air out my eyes, the droplets on a spider web and the grace they held. Who gave me permission to be this person, to drag my misfortune on this leash made of gold?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Erika, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, I feel like we always are, when we're talking about, like in general, when I feel like folks are talking about writers and poetry, there's always a conversation around like your writing style or your voice. Could you talk a little bit about like how you navigate your specific style or voice, what that means to you, and sort of how you think about or how you navigate like this idea of like my voice, my style?
Sure. Well, I don't know what the style is, honestly. I wonder what others think it is. So, great question. I think I'm still trying to figure that out. But for me, it's really important to, again, look for the overlooked, to pay attention to small moments, to pay attention to just little snippets of beauty in the world, because that's how I keep going, you know, and that's what makes me feel alive and connected to the world. So when I was writing that poem, it came in pieces. You know, I was in Portugal and I saw, for instance, a sign somewhere and it was just like a company and it was called the Republic of Flowers. And I was like, how stunning is that? You know? So I wrote that down and I was like, amazing. And then there are these images that came from different places. Like there was the image of a photo in a bottle of mezcal. Like I saw that in a documentary on it took place in Mexico. So I'm always taking from different places and putting them together. And the poem is about like a sort of longing, you know, that is impossible to articulate in some ways. And so that's what the word means, right? Like it's something that cannot be translated. And so my attempt is to translate is through this poem. And it's not like literally true, but it's hopefully emotionally true. And I think that's what's important in poetry. Like, does it feel authentic? You know, it doesn't have to be like a fact, because that's not fun. But does it feel true in your heart, in your body? You know, and so that's what, like, one of the truest things I've ever written, honestly, to me. And it captures a feeling that I've been trying to articulate for my entire life. And when I heard the term saudade, I was like, I know that. You know, like I didn't have the tools to explain how, but I felt it. And I heard the music, the traditional fado music from Portugal, and I was like, yep, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I love hearing you talk about this idea of like communicating and translating, right? Like, how do you translate something that you feel, that you specifically feel? How do you, what are the ways in which we communicate that feeling that like there isn't a specific word or words for? And so what are the tools we have to communicate this feeling, how to translate emotions? And sort of seeing, oh, this poem feels like the navigation, the attempt at that, right? To communicate and articulate and translate this emotion, this feeling.
Right, and I think poetry is what, for me, gets closest to that, to the core of it. And I feel like even then, there's something missing. And so often we talk about like the failure of language, the loneliness of language, where what I feel and what I imagine inside of myself is essentially impossible to replicate. And so poetry is what gets us closest to that. And so I feel like every poem in a sense is a failure. But it's like the closest thing that I know. And it's the truest thing that I know.
Oh, I love that. And like, it's actually the attempt that is the thing that that matters in this case, right? Like, because, you know, this, I think, was seeing something and being like, oh, I can't communicate that, so I'm not going to. Just like, it doesn't keep us moving forward. And what I'm hearing is that like poetry is the thing that keeps you moving forward. And so to understand that in that way is really beautiful. And I also wanted to lift up, like, I love this this idea of noticing deeply that you're speaking to as well, of like, you know, we read in the Republic of Flowers, and for you it was like this thing that sort of like caught your eye, which could have been easily missed, but like taking a moment to notice deeply about how beautiful the world is also feels really important to do right now.
Indeed. And I think that I have a even deeper appreciation for the world now that I can't like really be in it. And I just really, I can't wait to just be among people and listen to conversations and hear laughter and just see people's gestures. And I'm very much an observer. And, you know, like when I travel, which I've done a lot by myself, it's a lot of just that, just watching and appreciating the world. And, you know, there was a moment in Portugal where I was at a hotel and someone was frying eggs, like literally frying eggs, but I thought it was rain. And so I was like, oh, it's raining now, but it wasn't. It was just like the sound of frying eggs. So that's a literal thing that I believed. And that was really interesting to me. I'm like, oh, that sounds very similar.
Yeah.
And so another note that I wrote down, and then eventually it all kind of came together like a puzzle.
I feel like, and then like that level of like noticing, the level of alertness also, like, at least it makes me feel more present in the world sometimes when I feel like I'm like getting lost or I'm feeling disengaged in some way. Like just the act of noticing makes me feel present as well, which feels
and I think we're so easily distracted with technology, and myself included. And I feel that when I am like really listening, I feel present and I feel complete, and I have a sense of peace that I don't normally have. And I think that's really special, and I don't ever want to lose that. I think I try to cultivate that in my everyday life because I think it's important. And you know, Instagram and Twitter, whatever, I think it's fun, but ultimately it's not real life to me. You know, it feels very foreign in some ways and personal, and I mean, Twitter is kind of a cesspool at times, to be quite honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to sort of, I'm like sort of move into engaging the audience more as makers in this moment, and sort of transition into the sort of writing exercises that we have for them as well. Everyone who's here today, if I hadn't mentioned it earlier, you're also going to be writing. So if you don't have a piece of paper or a writing utensil, feel free to take like a brief moment to grab that. Or if you want to write on your computer, feel free to open up Word or whatever is going to be the most comfortable for you. And we're going to sort of shift into taking the things that we were talking about, this idea of translating all of these things into action and activating them a little bit. So the first writing exercise, Erika, when you brought it to me, I was like, what is this? And I'm also very excited to sort of think about translation in this way.
Yeah.
And sort of, I think it really reflects what our conversation earlier is speaking to as well. So would you mind talking to us, sort of introducing us to this writing exercise, and then John will put up the prompt whenever we get to it.
Yeah, so I implement a lot of writing exercises in my classes, and I use them myself to just try to make myself see the world differently and use language in a way that is new and fresh. Yeah. Because I feel like often we get so used to the way that we speak and write and see the world that we just kind of imitate ourselves. And so for me, it's really important to challenge the way that I write always. Like, I don't want to be writing the same books over and over and over again, or the same poems. And so writing exercises, I think, are a great way to like break out of my normal routine. This one in particular, I've used many, many times. I forgot when the first time I ever implemented it. It must have been introduced by some instructor at some point. But it's been so long that I honestly don't remember. But the point of the writing exercise is you take a text in a language that you're not familiar with, right? And you translate it according to how the words look to you. And so a lot of it's going to be just complete nonsense. And that's okay. The thing is not to censor yourself and to just go with your gut and let your instinct guide you. Because I think there's a lot that we have inside of ourselves that we carry that we don't have access to unless we really look, unless we go deeply inside of ourselves. So with these exercises, we're forced to just let go of our inner critic, our censor inside of us, and just associate things and words without trying to make sense. You don't have to make sense. Absolutely. And it's just a fun sort of thing to do. And I found like really amazing lines by doing this. I won't get a whole entire poem out of it, that's for sure. But like little nuggets of beauty usually come forth. And so, I think it's just really fun. It's very silly. You could have, just fun with it and do whatever comes to mind. I think as writers, we often are perfectionists, and it's really important to just kind of let that go for a little while and be uncomfortable and like kind of be startled by our own imagination.
Yes.
I think that's really fun, and that's part of what keeps me going is that surprise, that element of surprise. Like, oh my God, I wrote that. What does that even mean?
Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? Yes. Like, what in the world? So like, just do it. Just go for it. Try not to think too much. Just go with whatever comes to mind.
Awesome. So John is going to put up the poem that we'll be using as the text. To note that it is translated in Ukrainian, correct?
Yeah.
And so if you're familiar with that language, we hope you can do this with a different poem later on, maybe outside of this workshop. But John, would you mind putting up the slide with the text for us? Awesome. Erika, would you mind, just because I think it's always helpful to have like a model, just like a hypothetical, would you mind giving us an example of what that first line could be for you?
Sure. Well, first of all, this is a poem by Ocean Vuong that has been translated from English to Ukrainian.
Wait, which poem?
Actually, I don't know because I don't know Ukrainian.
I was like, I love Ocean Vuong. Okay, great.
Yeah, I wish I did. I will need a moment to translate, so just bear with me. And it's gonna be cuckoo bananas.
Of course.
Okay, great.
Take a moment.
Okay.
While you're doing that, just for anyone who doesn't know, Ocean Vuong, I'm gonna write his name in the text, is a brilliant poet and also published this book called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous last year, which is utterly gorgeous. So I recommend everyone check it out. Also, their poem, One Day I'll Love Ocean Vuong, is also heartbreakingly beautiful and one that I keep coming back to every now and again.
Yeah, it's a great collection.
Oh my God, so good.
Okay, I've got the good.
Okay.
So this is what I mean when I say you don't have to make sense. And if you do the entire thing, then you'll start to see threads and connections and all sorts of cool stuff. But like, honestly, it's gonna be a jumble.
Of course.
So the first things that came to mind as I read the first line was catharsis, ham, happiness, barbacoa, exclamation point. I don't know.
Great. No, but that gives us a sense. I feel like to gives us a sense to let go. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
John, hello.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted, if we could briefly recap what was said while the slide was up, just so we make sure everyone could see that through the interpretation.
Yes. So where would that?
So I think some of the things can fill in the gap. We did share that this poem is written in Ukrainian. It's a Ukrainian translation of an Ocean Vuong poem.
Mm-hmm.
And we challenged Erika to do a quick example, a short example of her translation exercise. Can you again just share what your example was, and then we'll move into letting you all do it.
Great.
Yeah. So as I said, this is gonna be nonsense. What came to mind immediately was catharsis, ham, happiness, and barbacoa. I think I have a meat craving right now, and so that's coming through.
Right.
So that's just something I didn't know about myself.
Totally.
And so as I said, like, when you do the entire poem, you start to make connections and you start to make sense of it in some form or other. But when it comes to like individual lines, just like go for it. It doesn't have to be a sentence. It doesn't have to like, flow logically in any sort of way. It starts to come together, I think, once you complete the entire thing.
Right. And then we're gonna give everyone about like 5-6 minutes to engage with this text. But then we'll have moment at the end to sort of, if anyone wants to share their line or a moment or a snippet, they can feel free to after. We'll have a moment to reflect afterwards as well about how that process was for us. right, and we're back. Awesome. It's tough. I feel like I was having a hard time. Everything I had was literally like words that were scattered, and like somewhere was a phrase, but I was like, was it related to that, or was it what I was just thinking right now? Like, it was interesting to,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting to like, I feel like I learned more about my thought process in that way, where I was like, oh, when I'm reading this, I'm noticing an image or a word, and then that word leads me to think about this phrase, and that thing leads me to think about this thing. I feel like, and then I was like, oh wait, let me come back to the text, because I was not reading the text, because my brain was like spiraling on something else.
No, that's exactly what should happen. That's
Yeah.
that's really awesome that your mind wandered in that way. Like, that's the point. So great job.
I love that word too, wandering. I feel like we don't let our minds wander because we want the specificity of like, is this right?
Right. And poetry isn't that way.
It's not. And so I think that wandering leads to such great discoveries.
Yeah. And poetry, for me, it takes a very long time to write. And it takes a lot of like deep thinking and silence. And, I mean, I just wrote just a bunch of words, that are not connected, but as I'm looking through all the words, I'm like, wait a minute, there is something there. I keep seeing the word hex, and I don't know why. And I think that's really interesting. Like, why am I thinking of that particular word?
Yeah, so, and I totally, and I think this idea of like, how do you engage something you're not familiar with? What does that say about the way where your mind wanders to immediately?
Right. And
like, yeah.
No, you're totally right. And that sort of familiarity is something to avoid when writing. The magic is in the discomfort.
I love that.
Something is like scary or startling or whatever, that's where the magic happens for me. And so just go there, let your mind go to where it needs to go rather than to try to make sense of it.
Awesome. I'm going to read some of the things that I'm seeing in the chat. Some folks were like, that was for sure hard. I only got 2 lines.
Yeah.
Some folks said my words, flowing, connected, powerful. Repetition of certain words show a relationship, a longing, a sadness. Someone mentioned it was really hard to keep my place in the writing when I was translating. One line someone got was, I try nothing, unpacking fathoms.
Oh my God, that's an amazing line.
That is an amazing line.
Oh my goodness.
Someone is talking about how they found themselves influenced by the shape of the first letter and discovering a word that jumped out at them, right? So like, again, like, I feel like that says so much about how this person is engaging something that's unfamiliar to them, that they're like seeing something and sort of that sparks this other thing. So I love that. Someone was saying, I kept mixing Spanish and English when writing. They're bilingual. And for this exercise, words were coming for them in Spanish.
That's amazing.
I love that.
That's how it works for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love. Awesome. Y'all, and again, we're gonna have a challenge at the end. So this is just generating material for us. So we're not starting from a place of like nothing, because I think that is sometimes a very scary place to start from. I was at a poetry retreat. I think something that you were mentioning, Erika, is like, we are our worst critic, and that always is the thing that leads to us not doing something. Right. I was at a poetry retreat, and Franny Choi, who is a poet that I really love, was doing this exercise, and she was like, bear with me, it's gonna be weird. She had us all close our eyes, and we had to write with our eyes closed.
Ooh, I love that.
And write with our eyes closed while listening to her recite a poem that she just picked from something else. So we were responding to the stimulus, but we were writing with our eyes closed. And she was like, I do this sometimes just for me to like trick myself enough to like write something without like me constantly being like, oh, this sucks. Oh, this is bad. Oh, whatever. Like, I just need to trick myself a little bit to really, really engage that. And again, similarly, it's like, it's not going to be a poem by the end of it. You're writing with your eyes closed, but they're going to find, I found some nuggets where I was like, oh, this is super interesting.
Well, that's a brilliant idea because it forces you to pay attention to the act of writing, like the physical act without like really thinking. And you're probably picking up certain words and leaving out others, you know? And so I think that's really amazing. And thank you, Franny Choi. I'm stealing that.
Right, shout out Franny Choi.
Thank you. I'm gonna do this tonight.
I'm writing her name down just so people know. Okay, so we have one more exercise for you. So we're gonna move into that. So this is, could you talk a little bit about this, how you use this exercise?
Yeah, so I am a big fan of music while writing, and I'm easily distracted, so it's usually just piano. And one of my favorite musicians is Philip Glass. I saw him once, and I felt like my brain was just gonna combust in my head. Incredible person. And this particular song is just so stunning to me. And I feel like there's a story there. I don't know what the story is. And that's something for you to discover on your own, I suppose. But it's something that really helps set a tone, a mood. And again, it's a free write. And so don't listen to the critic, just keep your pen moving or keep typing as you listen. And I think you'll be really delighted by what you find. Again, you know, you're not going to write a poem at the end of this exercise necessarily, but the nuggets, let's go back to that idea of like these little jewels that we find in these exercises, and how we can take those and then, you know, possibly use them in a poem. So, you know, to me, writing a poem is often tedious, but like really fun at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's
it totally makes sense.
I'm very meticulous.
Sucks, but also, this is great.
It's like my favorite thing in the whole world, and yet there are times where it makes me want to cry because I don't know how to like put it together.
Yeah.
It's like a puzzle, a tapestry. I don't know. It's hard to explain. So yeah, the same kind of approach you will use in this exercise, and really just have fun with it. I think people forget to play in writing and to just, you know, have a good time. It doesn't always have to be excruciating. It can be, and in, you know, the revision process, it should be in some ways, but when you're just starting to like mine material, like it should just be fun and weird and mysterious.
Totally.
And just a discovery. So same logic applies to this exercise.
Do you have any tips for anyone who might feel stuck sometimes, even if they you know, like trying to do this, don't censor yourself, et cetera, but like when you feel stuck in this moment, like for this exercise, what is like maybe something someone could try?
You know, I've heard this from other teachers. You know, you could write, this is stupid, I hate this, blah, 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 etc. This is pointless, you know. You could talk shit in your writing process. And that's okay, because like who's gonna read it? Who cares? And it helps kind of break through that, I think, to acknowledge how difficult it is and how frustrating it can be.
Totally. And I feel like, you know, someone we both know, Isaac Gomez, once told one of my groups, like, just write the same word over and over again. Like, keep your pen down, or if you're typing, keep typing, and just try to keep that idea of like emotion alive. And maybe that's the thing, and something will come out of it, right? But like, try writing the same word or phrase over and over and over again.
And grammar and spelling, just who cares?
Yeah.
No one cares.
Awesome. So John, thank you so much for being awesome. John is going to play the song about 6 minutes. So you're going to have 6 minutes to do a free write. Again, this may feel intimidating, but like really have fun, listen to the music, notice what you're noticing in the music, write in response to the music or write in like dissonance to the music, whatever. Really take a moment and be with yourself and just take this time to free write. Awesome. Okay, great, awesome. Wow, I felt like I got lost there. That was awesome.
Great. Yeah, I did it too. It was super fun.
I'm also hearing that as well. Oh my God, I feel like someone said they didn't know writing.
Oh, full of questions.
Let me read some of these out loud. I feel this was a little easier and it was a cool experience. Where is it? Oh my God. As they sign and dance across the sky in a circle, staring at each other, chirp, chirp, chirp. This
Oh my
piano
God.
loves itself. This piano loves its.
I'm sorry, you're frozen for me.
Yeah, I'm just coming in here for
Okay.
a bit. And B, if it's helpful to turn off your video just for audio. Oh, you're back.
I'm
Hi.
back. I'm
Hey.
back.
Okay.
Yes. I
Joyce
literally was
texted me.
reading the chat for a minute. So, Erika, would you mind talking a little bit about how that process was for you? In this
Sure.
moment?
Well, first of all, some of these lines are stunning that I'm reading here in the chat. So like, wow, great job. I wrote a lot of questions as well. I kept writing why and why and why and why over and over again. And I think what I'm discovering is like the rage that I'm feeling during this time is just like manifesting itself in everything. And I kept asking like what it means to be a person, a human being, you know, and like, do we agree on that? And I don't think we all do. Especially, you know, people who are in power, they don't have the same understanding of what it means to be a society or to be just a person in the world. And so like, can we change that? You know, I just had all these like philosophical questions. I had a lot of images of blackened skies and factories in the distance. And I had, how do we survive horror? And I asked music, trees, insects, etc. Yeah, it's a little bit dark, but I think there was a lot of hope in the exercise as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Similarly, no, go ahead. Sorry.
No, the last line that I wrote, I said, I love so much. That is the truest thing I know. And so despite whatever is happening, like we still love each other, you know, we still love the world, and there's still beauty in the world. And so that helps me survive, you know?
Yeah, I was saying mine when you're talking about like the sort of the pockets of darkness that sort of come through as well. I was like, mine started with a shadow is worth 1,000 words. And I was like, shadow, fear, like whatever. And I'm like, it is an act of being present with yourself that is just so exciting. You know, and refreshing sometimes, and also scary sometimes.
Yeah, and acknowledging the ugliness of just being a person and being alive, you know, like I think that's something that I really embrace in my work. I'm not afraid of the darkness, and I work through the darkness with words, you know, and for me it's very cathartic because as a person who struggles with depression, like I have to make sense of it somehow, and poetry for me is the most healthy way for me to do so.
Totally. I'm going to ask you some of the questions that we're getting in the Q&A section before we move on to the Maker Challenge in a little bit as well. So someone was talking about, I think this lines in work with what we were just talking about. How do you get over sort of the fear of writing? Or like, for example, having to say the right thing or trying to be profound. I think we were talking a little bit with these exercises. These exercises are helping with that, but do you have any specific thing around that, response to that?
Yeah, I feel like when I'm writing in my journal, which I have several of, you know, I have like different sizes for different occasions. When I'm writing here, no one's gonna read this but me. And so whatever I need to write, I just do. I don't try to sound profound. I don't try to make it beautiful. I just write what I feel is inside of me. And the revision process, that's when I get into how does this make sense? How does this communicate something important to a reader? But when I am just writing freely, I don't have those types of limitations for myself. And I know that's really hard to do, but it's something that you can cultivate. And I always tell my students, like, you could write anything and no one has to read it. You could write like the worst poem in the world, and who cares? Like, you don't have to publish that poem. And I've written pretty terrible things that I will never show a single person. So it's like, it's mine. And that's something that belongs to you, and it's okay if it's not good, if it's not profound. It's just for me, it's part of the process. I think you froze again. I'm sorry.
I'll jump back in.
Sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all of this. We are reaching the end. While Abhi comes back on for any last minute stuff, we can talk about the Maker Challenge. Oh, there's needed to vamp, just needed to fill it.
Of course.
So I was gonna move into the Maker Challenge unless there was anything else you wanted to cover before that.
I feel like I feel like we have time to answer one or two or more of these questions before we hop into the Maker Challenge, if that's fine. Of course, the questions went away from me, but I know one of the questions I was remembering is someone was talking about being an 8th grade teacher and wanting to teach poetry, but their coworkers being scared of poetry.
Sure.
In a way. Could you talk a little bit about like how your thoughts on teaching poetry, on like making that accessible in different ways?
Sure. Yeah, I think poetry, what makes it so beautiful to me is that it is very mysterious and you don't have to understand everything. And there is not one single meaning that we draw from a poem. There are many meanings. And we all come to a text with a certain amount of experiences and baggage. And so the way that I read a poem and the way you read a poem could be completely different, and that's okay. So I don't think it's good for teachers to impose meanings upon students. Let them interpret it however they see fit. Talk a lot about feelings and senses and, you know, metaphor and simile and like playfulness in the writing, rather than to teach poems in a way that's rigid and really not fun, because kids want to be able to like use their imaginations. They don't want to be told what things mean when it comes to art, I think. And just like let them write poems. I think kids actually do love poetry, from what I've experienced. And I think we mess up when we like just impose our vision and our ideologies onto them. So just let them be free. No answer is wrong unless there's like no basis for it. Like if you could support your interpretation, then it's valid.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Who are some poets, this is something that I saw in the chat, who are some poets that really like influenced you, that you really look to when you navigate your own writing?
Yeah, so many. I mean, where do I begin? I've been reading Emily Dickinson to my stepkids, which they seem to really like. I think we often underestimate children, and so like expose them to all sorts of poems, and I'm sure they're going to be delighted. So Emily Dickinson has been one. Larry Levis is an underrated poet, in my opinion, who is just brilliant. I'll write his name in the chat. Also, you know, the classics, Walt Whitman. Right now, I am reading Roberto Bolaño's poetry collection called The Romantic Dogs. I read it, but I'm rereading it because it's just stunning. Jericho Brown, who just won the Pulitzer, The Tradition.
Yes.
It's just so good, just brilliant. He's the first queer Black writer to win the Pulitzer, so it's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah. Ilya Kaminsky, who wrote The Deaf Republic, stunning work.
Yes.
He's won all sorts of stuff. One of my good friends is a Jamaican poet named Sophia Sinclair, who writes just beautifully. She's just incredible. Love her. Yeah, and the list goes on and on. I don't even know.
Of course. I loved hearing sort of that snippet of like folks that are, at least also the folks that are like in the top of your mind right now.
Yeah.
The sort of the final question that I wanted to leave us with, and I there's so many questions, and I promise we'll get to some more of them in part 2 on Friday, which I hope everyone joins us for as well. Is the question is, how do you take like sort of the poem out of you know, the journal and revise it in a way where it doesn't destroy its integrity? Or the question also is like, when is a poem done? Like, how do you qualify that for yourself at least?
Yeah, it's largely intuitive for me, and I read poems aloud a lot, and I make sure that they sound beautiful, at least for me. Yeah. I want them to be pleasing to the ear. I want them to be accessible in some form to an everyday person, not necessarily someone who's like majored in poetry. Yeah. I want it to feel authentic and true in whatever way that is. And so what I do is I write a ton of notes for often months or weeks or whatever in my notebook. And then I start to piece it all together. And I'm like, what am I seeing here? What's the thread in this like raw material? And so like, that's the challenge that I am posing to you all, is to take those 2 writing exercises and to take whatever strikes you from them and try to make sense of them in the form of a poem. And of course, this is going to be rough, and you know, I don't expect it to be polished or publishable or whatever. Like that's not important right now. So just really like engage with the work and think about what your subconscious is trying to tell you, because there's so much there. And I want you to just really play and have fun, and, you know, not think about, is it deep? you know, will people like it? Like, that doesn't matter at this point.
Why don't we actually go and talk about the Maker Challenge and sort of give the instructions for it and move into that realm now.
Sure.
John, I'm noticing that we'll put the slide up and I'll speak to it, and then we'll pull this slide down and I can repeat things that need to get repeated or might need to get repeated. Awesome. So if you wouldn't throw in the slide. Awesome. So we are challenging you in the time between today and Friday, which is the next part of the workshop, to write a poem. Pick one object that means something special to you, something unique, an object that has a very specific relationship to you, noting that you won't have to share it with anyone what that relationship or what that object is unless you want to. And using the ingredients in the next slide, which we'll show in just a moment, write a 10 to 15 line poem that attempts to communicate how your chosen object makes you feel without being literal, without telling anyone what the actual relationship is between you and the object. So similar to what we were talking about with Saudade, sort of translating that feeling, right? Trying to do some emotional translating. So again, that is pick one object that means something special to you, something unique, an object that has a very specific relationship to you. And using the ingredients that we'll show in just a moment, create a 10 to 15 line poem that attempts to communicate how your chosen object makes you feel without being literal, without telling anyone what the actual relationship is between you and the object. Awesome. So let's go to the next slide, John. So you can redo the visual translation exercise and the music exercise on your own time between now and Friday. So don't worry if you're like, I only had one line or whatnot. Like, feel free to do that exercise again for you and like really sit with it and take the time you need. But the ingredients are: try to incorporate 3 lines from your response to the visual translation exercise, 3 lines from your response to the music exercise, and 1 line that's a question. And that can be anything, right? Think about what kind of images, sounds, smells, colors that this object brings up for you. Think about the memory it brings up for you. You can, of course, shift, edit, adjust your lines and ingredients, arrange them however will work for you. And think about how the lines are structured when someone reads them. Refer to the visual translation exercise. How are people looking at this thing as well? So that is the Maker Challenge. And John, if you want to bring down that slide, I can also speak it so we make sure that we're getting the ASL translation. So the ingredients are using 3 lines from your response to the visual translation exercise, 3 lines from your response to the music exercise, and 1 line that's a question. Incorporate those things in however way you can arrange it, you can edit it. It doesn't have to be like, this is the line that I wrote, so this is the line in the poem. Feel free to rearrange it and edit it into the 10 to 15 line poem that attempts to communicate how this object makes you feel without being literal, without telling anyone what the actual relationship is. And then we'll get to have about a few participants on Friday to share pieces of what they wrote, to be in conversation with myself and Erika, and also a special guest who I won't say other than he worked on I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter in a very specific capacity. So please know that there will be more engagement in that capacity. Erika, the one thing that I want to say is that the PDF of that exercise will be sent to everyone via email and is also going to be uploaded on our website, so you can refer to that document. Don't worry, we got you. Thank you, John, for putting that in the link. You didn't have to just memorize all those instructions. Erika, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Really looking forward to Friday. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with before we call it a day?
One thing that I also do is draw a lot. And so I think visual art is also a really great tool for poetry. It teaches, again, us how to see, how to pay attention. So all you artists out there, like just find a way to incorporate poetry with your art. And I think that could be really fun. So yeah, this was great. And I'm gonna also try to write the poem.
Yes.
We'll see how that goes.
Me too.
Yeah.
So it'll be great. Awesome. Looking forward to seeing everyone on Friday, for those of you who joined us. Also, this will be available on Facebook Live if you need to refer to it again, or if you just want to hear it again.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.